The story opens with Philippe Petit standing atop the Statue of Liberty, addressing the audience directly. He declares that he does not fear death, nor does he ever speak of it except when trying to explain himself. That's why, he says, he chooses to walk on the wire. His passion for conquering the impossible inspires him to take on the greatest challenge of his life, walking between the twin towers of the World Trade Center. We are then taken back to Paris in 1973, where Philippe works as a street performer, entertaining crowds with his juggling, magic tricks, and unicycle stunts. However, he's constantly chased by the police for performing without a permit, something he refuses to obtain because he believes art shouldn't need permission. During one of his shows, a girl gives him a jawbreaker, and while he's playing around with it, he accidentally bites into it and cracks a tooth. At the dentist's office, Philippe notices a magazine showing a picture of the unfinished Twin Towers in New York. Instantly captivated, he tears the page out. His dream begins to take shape. He recalls his childhood, when he first saw high-wire walkers at a circus and became obsessed with mastering the art himself. Despite his father's disapproval, Philippe practiced relentlessly, learning to juggle, balance, and climb until his skills became natural. One day, as an adult, Philippe sneaks into a circus tent to try walking on the wire himself. But he's caught by the owner, Rudy Amankowski, known as Papa Rudy. Rudy chases him away until Philippe grabs a few random items and starts juggling them, impressing the old man. Intrigued, Rudy begins to mentor him and teach him the professional techniques of wire walking. After a performance, Rudy invites Philippe to officially join the circus, but Philippe refuses, saying he's not a clown, he's an artist. Offended, Rudy throws him out. Determined to follow his dream, Philippe leaves his home and family behind, unsure of what exactly he's searching for but certain he'll find it in Paris. Riding his unicycle into the city, Philippe spots a young woman named Annie singing and playing guitar in the street, surrounded by a small crowd. He quickly sets up his own circle nearby and unintentionally steals her audience. Later, Annie confronts him angrily, but Philippe insists he didn't mean to take her crowd, he just wanted to share it. He even promises to only perform when she's not singing. The next day, as it rains, Philippe walks beside Annie under his umbrella. They talk and get to know each other. He compliments her voice and tells her about his dream of walking between the Twin Towers. Annie is intrigued and supportive, and soon, romance blossoms between them. She becomes his first accomplice in planning his high-wire act. Annie begins training with him, and before long, Philippe meets Jean-Louis, a photographer who becomes his second accomplice. Philippe tells him about his dream to walk between the Twin Towers. Jean-Louis, also skilled with a bow and arrow, promises to help by shooting the first line from one tower to the other. During one practice session, Philippe's training wire snaps, and he falls hard to the ground. Undeterred, he seeks out Papa Rudy again and asks for help, promising to pay him. Rudy allows him to travel with his troupe but forbids him from performing. A few weeks later, Philippe finally gets his first official wire walk in a public park over a lake during a fishing contest. The fishermen boo him, breaking his concentration, and he falls into the water, but his determination doesn't fade. Soon, Philippe decides his next walk will be between the towers of Notre Dame Cathedral. At night, he and his photographer friend secretly set up the wires. As the morning crowd gathers, he performs successfully, but the police arrest him soon after. His stunt makes the newspapers, yet Philippe is frustrated that his homeland doesn't truly appreciate him. Still ranting, he shows Annie the photo of the Twin Towers again. She smiles and tells him to go for it. Philippe takes it as a sign and to move to New York to pursue his dream. When they arrive, Philippe gazes up at the nearly completed Twin Towers and immediately feels both awe and doubt. The scale seems impossible, but he finds his way to the roof, standing at the edge and looking down at the dizzying height. Fear grips him for a moment, but his determination returns stronger than ever. He vows to make it happen. Back at the hotel, he meets Jean-Francois, also known as Jeff, a math teacher who speaks mostly in equations. Philippe convinces him to join the team as their third accomplice. Papa Rudy, although worried, agrees to continue helping Philippe and insists he use a safety harness because of the extreme height. But Philippe refuses, calling it cowardly. Rudy gets angry but eventually respects Philippe's decision and even returns his payment, telling him to follow his dream. The team begins to practice intensely. Philippe names the mission the coup, scheduling it for August 6, 1974, just before the tower's completion, when weather conditions will be ideal. The crew returns to New York, and Philippe begins scouting the towers in secret, using disguises to gather information, measurements, security routines, and access points. During one of his undercover trips, dressed as an architect, he accidentally steps on a nail that pierces his foot. Despite the injury, he refuses medical treatment. The event is only 3 weeks away, and nothing will stop him. Using crutches, he continues his planning. While sneaking around one of the towers, he meets Barry Greenhouse, an employee on the 82nd floor, who admires Philippe's determination. Barry agrees to help and becomes their inside man. Soon after, Philippe meets Jean-Pierre, a French-speaking American who provides the team with a wired radio so they can communicate without the police detecting their signals. Jean-Louis brings in 2 more accomplices, Albert and David, who complete the crew. As the date of the coup draws near, Philippe becomes restless and anxious. Jean suggests they postpone, but Philippe refuses to even consider it. Late at night, he builds a wooden crate for his cables, hammering nails into it so loudly that Annie wakes up. He calls it his coffin, which Ange Hershey worries about his safety. They argue, and Philippe admits he's scared. Annie comforts him, assuring him that he'll succeed. Finally, August 6th arrives. Philippe, Jeff, Jean, and David disguise themselves as delivery workers, carrying the heavy equipment to the top of the South Tower. A suspicious security guard stops them at first but lets them through after some convincing. They're denied access to the elevator since it's rented out by construction workers, but Jean manages to talk their way in. Once they reach the roof, David panics, thinking the police are onto them. He flees, leaving Philippe and Jeff to continue the mission. As night falls, they start setting up the wire, but a guard's walkie-talkie suddenly crackles nearby, forcing them to hide under a tarp stretched across a ventilation shaft. Jeff trembles with fear while Philippe, half delirious, begins to hallucinate. Luckily, the guard eventually falls asleep, allowing them to resume. Across the gap, Jean-Louis and Albert stand on the North Tower, ready with the bow and arrow. Jean-Louis fires the arrow carrying a thin line between the towers. Philippe waits, listening for the sound of impact but hears nothing. In panic, he crawls along the roof, even removing his clothes to feel more clearly for the line. At last, he spots the arrow dangling over the edge and grabs it before it falls. They pull the first cord across and begin tightening the main cable. As dawn approaches, a security guard starts climbing the stairs toward the roof. Philippe and Jeff quickly hide again, and the guard gets called away for a pizza delivery. They continue securing the line, using a fishing hook to keep it from slipping. The rope almost falls at one point, but Philippe catches it just in time. Meanwhile, Albert, discouraged and doubting Philippe's success, decides to quit. He even plans to sell the photographs himself. Philippe tries to convince him to stay, promising that if the setup fails, he'll abandon the plan entirely. Annie, watching from the ground, stays up all night praying for him. When the final adjustments are made, a man suddenly appears on the roof. He says nothing, he just looks around, then gives Philippe a small approving nod before walking away. Philippe later refers to him as the mysterious visitor. With the line finally secured, Philippe puts on his black costume and tightrope shoes. As he's getting ready, his turtleneck shirt accidentally falls over the edge. From below, Annie panics, thinking he's fallen, but relaxes when she realizes it's just his shirt. Furious but focused, Philippe decides to walk in his undershirt anyway. He grips his long balancing pole, steps out onto the wire, and begins the walk. Annie, Barry, and Jean-Pierre watch from the ground, drawing a growing crowd of astonished New Yorkers. Step by step, Philippe crosses the immense gap and reaches the North Tower. The crowd erupts in applause. But Philippe isn't done. Feeling that the wire still calls to him, he turns around and walks back toward the South Tower. 2 policemen reach Jeff on the South Tower and detain him. Philippe continues walking calmly back and forth several times, taunting the officers. When he nears the North Tower again, more police await him. They plead with him to come back safely, but Philippe playfully lies down on the wire, then gets up and even dances a little. A bird flies past him, and for a moment, It feels like he's floating among the clouds. At last, he walks back to the South Tower and surrenders peacefully. He leaves the wire behind as a symbol of victory. The crowd below cheers wildly. When a construction worker later tries to cut the wire, Philippe is arrested, but instead of anger, the police and workers applaud his courage. News of the incredible stunt spreads worldwide. Even Papa Rudy beams with pride. Philippe and his crew celebrate their triumph, and he thanks them all for believing in his impossible dream. A judge sentences Philippe to perform one free public wire walk in Central Park, which he happily does for families and children. He decides to stay in New York, calling it his new home. Annie, however, chooses to return to France to chase her own dreams. Philippe also mentions that he was granted a special pass allowing him to visit the top of the Twin Towers anytime he wanted. On the pass, where an expiration date should have been, someone had crossed it out and written one word: forever. A soft smile fades from Philippe's face as he looks toward the towers one last time. The movie ends with a final shot of the Twin Towers standing tall, majestic, and eternal.